Today we're going to be talking about Dune. Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to Victims and Villains, we are a non-profit that creates content that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia. I have the pleasure of being both a writer and podcaster here. And if you guys like what we stand for, hit the subscribe button down below. I'm going to put a disclaimer on this video right away. I'm going to say that I have not read the original Dune. I don't know any of the source material. And two, I have never seen the David Lynch movie. And I guess my last disclaimer that I should put on here is that this film is extremely hard to simplify in its plot. So for the first time ever, all my synopsis for this movie is actually going to come from IMDb. So let's go ahead and do this. A, quote, feature adaptation of Frank Herbert's science fiction novel about a son of a noble family entrusted with the protection of the most valuable asset and most vital element in the galaxy, end quote. So I had a conversation with someone who's actually read the book. And so partially some of my review is actually going to be based on the information that they have shared and also observations that I've made throughout the course of the film. This film is so rich and so layered that it's really hard to make an adequate review here. That said, I will start off by saying the first thing that this film has to offer is exquisite performances. No performance is wasted. Timothée, man, I'm gonna permit Timothée, however you say the kid's name, Paul, excellent through and through. It's the first film I've ever seen him in. I know he's one of the up and coming actors that like a lot of people are just got their name like their eyes on, and this was my first introduction to him, and he just blew me out of the water. Second, I'm convinced at this point that Rebecca Ferguson, it is impossible for this woman to deliver a terrible performance, whether she's doing action in Mission Impossible, or she's being the antagonist in Dr. Sleep, or she's singing her heart out and being a sweetheart in The Greatest Showman. This woman just delivers a world-class performance here. She's kind of the emotional backbone of this film, which I found to be such fascinating, and it really allowed her character to bring forth a lot of the talent that Ferguson actually has as an actress. Kind of in minor roles for this film, Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, and Jason Momoa all give stellar performances. Dave Bautista and Mr. Skarsgård is kind of very creepy in this movie. This cast is just stacked, so it's really hard to pull out one performance that outshines the other, because they all play the very intricate part into bringing this epic story to life. And if I could describe this movie in anything, I would describe it as epic. It fills the need to be seen on the largest screen possible. I said that last year about Tenet, and I still stand by that, and I'm saying that this year, that if you could see any film on the big screen, make it Dune, because Dune just embodies the epicness and the scope and just the intensity and emotional that reminds us this is the type of movie and the reason for why we go to the movies to begin with. And I have a love-hate relationship with the art direction of this movie. I really love it because it brings an art house style that you don't see in a lot of these types of movies. It's very much like, you know, the art house style of A24 done on a epic budget. And it gives this Dune a very unique quality that you don't see a lot of in the science fiction genre. My biggest problem with the art direction in this is that there's so much foreshadowing for the entire, what I'm assuming is a trilogy, that a large portion of the story for its foundation suffers. And Zendaya's character is a great example of this. The film opens up on a monologue from her, and the only time that we see her throughout the entire film is these visions that Paul has. And these visions are clearly foreshadowing for what will come in possibly part 2 and maybe even 3. And while I understand sowing the seeds of world building, this movie sometimes feels like it's focusing too much on its world building aspects and not enough on the story that it's presently trying to tell. And I get it. I understand that the source material is quite thick. Much like other books, I've read this sucker twice. And even this took 2 movies to tell and still didn't cover everything that King covers in his book. But the difference between those and the way that DuVernay sets up Dune is interesting, because when you look at it chapter 1 versus it chapter 2, there's no foreshadowing with the exception of like a few some select dialogue projecting to what's going to take place in chapter 2. This one spends at least a quarter of its film projecting what we will see in parts 2 and 3, should they be greenlit. This movie's a slow burn, but I'm honestly curious to see enough where these characters go and ultimately what the final story is going to be once it's all said and done. Our mental health moment for this film comes from Paul's experience and Paul's journey of identity. And if you guys are new to our content, mental health moment is where we pull a theme of mental health and or a word of encouragement out from the source material of which we're reviewing. Paul, our protagonist, spends the entire film searching for his purpose and searching for his identity and kind of trying to understand the points of these visions. And I really just want to hone in on the importance of understanding your identity and how that correlates to your mental health. Because if you don't have security in your identity, if you don't really have security in your mental health, and it kind of suffers from it. As scary as it might be and as uncomfortable as it might be to put names to things like depression, anxiety, or even addiction, they help shape and mold us into who we are and who we're going to be. How we respond to them in those types of situations, honestly, says a lot about our identity. It boils down to our identity. So much so that there's actually a scene between Oscar Isaac as a father to Timolette's Paul. As I said, I'm super sorry for mispronouncing all of these names. But he talks about leadership, and he talks about how he never wanted to be this great leader. He wanted to be a pilot, but he said that, you know, leaders aren't chosen, leaders rise to the occasion. And when it comes to our identity, it might not always be, it's how we respond to depression, it's how we respond to anxiety and rising to lead and take charge. Because just because we have it doesn't mean that it has to be our identity. I realize that I kind of rambled there, but I hope all of that made sense. And I hope that encouraged you in some way, shape, or form. But if you're watching this and you're struggling with suicide, depression, addiction, or self-harm, we encourage you to check out the resource library in the show notes below. Because remember that you have value and you have worth. Let's run this sucker through our Rorschach rating scale. I am going to give this a 3 out of 5. And I'm going to, like I said, this movie is beautiful. It's filled with stunning performances. The art direction is both a blessing and a curse. This film focuses a little bit too much on its foreshadowing and not enough on its foundation. And so in that case, I'm really excited to see where DuVernay is going to take part 2 and possibly 3 to kind of see what the scope of this film looks like as a whole. But if you guys have seen Dune, read the book, or even seen the David Lynch movie, let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of either one. Are you guys a fan of this? How does it stack up to other properties like Star Wars and Star Trek? Let me know down in the descriptions below, and I hope you guys have a great night, and join us this weekend on Twitch, twitch.tv/victims and villains. We're going to be doing a 48-hour fundraiser, all celebrating mental health and spookiness to get mental health resources into film festivals, conventions, and more. Starts tomorrow at 2 p.m. here on Twitch. Have a good night, guys.